Welcome to Felony Friday, a presentation of the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here is your host, John Odermatt.
Felons, friends, and freedom lovers, welcome back to another episode of Felony Friday on the Lions of Liberty podcast. Every single week on this show, we strive to expose injustice in the broken criminal justice system. During today's show, we're going to welcome another member of the Lions of Liberty Pride on a Felony Friday. Last week, we had Brian McWilliams on, and we're going to have none other than Marc Clair on today's episode. But before I introduce Marc, I just want to remind you guys, because we're going to be talking about a lot of different stories, a lot of different felonies in the news. So if you want to follow along, if you want to read the stories, we should definitely go to the show notes page at lionsofliberty.com/FF17. This is episode 17, so it's easy to remember. It's just lionsofliberty.com/FF17. I'll post links to everything we're going to talk about there, and you can follow along at home. Like I said, my guest today is Marc Clair. If you aren't familiar with Marc, then you probably haven't listened to many episodes of the Lions of Liberty podcast because he hosts just about everything other than Felony Friday. Marc is a co-founder of Lions of Liberty. He's the creator of the Lions of Liberty podcast, and he is doing the show today recovering from food poisoning. Marc, it's great to have you back on Felony Friday.
It's great to be back once again, except for the whole food poisoning thing. But,
you can't win them all. You can't win them all.
You can't. And the issues that we're going to discuss today are very important. And even a slight tinge of food poisoning ain't going to stop us.
Nothing's going to keep your liberty down. Nothing's going to turn your liberty down. Just keep it turned up. That's what the kids are saying today.
I think I'm on the upswing. I don't feel wonderful, but there's no more convulsions or anything like that. So I'm just have a general feeling of ickiness. The same sort of feeling you get after watching basically a Republican debate or a Democrat debate, for that matter.
Look, fair enough. Well, if you need to vomit, we'll just pause the show and start right back up.
No one will ever
know.
Let me never know.
Nobody will ever know the magic of podcasting.
Little do you guys know, I already puked twice during this discussion, but we edited it out. So.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So, Marc, I haven't talked to you in podcast form for a little while here. And I think since the last time I talked to you on a podcast, you had a little bit of you had a doctor on your show, Dr. Ron Paul. So I just wanted to ask you something about that.
Sure.
How much has your life changed pre and post Ron Paul? Like now when you go out to a bar, do people just buy you drinks? Do people want to take selfies with you? Has it changed your life?
It has just completely turned my world upside down. I've turned into a celebritarian. I'm constantly getting tweets. I'm constantly getting Facebook messages, most of them from creepy looking spam bots. But honestly, nothing's changed at all. Except I feel great that I finally got to interview Dr. Ron Paul. It has certainly gotten the show some more attention. Obviously it was a pretty well listened to episode. So that's always nice because, we put in so much work doing this stuff and we don't do it to make millions of dollars or to make any dollars at this point. And we do it because we know there are certain things in the world. There are injustices out there that need to be pointed out. And, that's why you do Felony Friday, to point out these injustices. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. But the guy that inspired all this in many ways was Ron Paul. So it really did. He got the ball rolling, at least intellectually speaking, and in terms of getting us inspired to speak vocally about our political beliefs. So it was very, very cool to talk to him. And of course, I recommend going to check out that interview, episode 200 of the Lions of Liberty podcast, which you can find at lionsofliberty.com/200.
And if for some reason you can't remember that, I will link to it in the show notes as well. If you're already staring at those, you can just scroll on down and click on it and listen to it.
You can Google Ron Paul Lions of Liberty there. If you can't find it and you're listening to a podcast, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, you should probably just, I don't know. We'll just leave it there. We'll just leave it there. You'll find it if you want to listen. I believe you. So let's get started talking about these felonies. We got 4 or 5 to talk about today. First one comes from Jensen Beach, Florida. And this has 2 felons got in a little trouble shooting some firearms at a gun range.
Sound like Larry King queuing up a guest. Jensen Beach, Florida. You're on Felony Friday.
Jensen Beach,
What's your
Florida.
felony this week?
I don't even know where that is. I know it's a beach in Florida. They're pretty much all the same, right?
As far as I know.
The 2 guys' names, Aldrich James Lott and John Robert Ruker, gave their full names. Must be a pretty distinguished fellows there.
Are they assassins? Usually they reserve the 3 name for people that assassinate presidents or John Lennon or that kind of thing.
Assassins or lawyers or I don't know. 3 names common with both. Okay, so Mr. Lott and Mr. Rucker entered a gun shop and indoor shooting range last November. And everything would be fine with that, of course, for the fact that they are felons. And Lott and Rucker were recorded on video surveillance shooting targets with multiple firearms, including a Glock 30, a Smith & Wesson MP40, and a Hi-Point 9mm pistol. So what's the problem with convicted felons, shooting firearms? Well, they're not allowed to by federal law, not allowed to be around firearms, not allowed to hold a firearm, not allowed to hold even ammunition. So even just being in that gun range, they're in trouble just for being there. And what happened is law enforcement, they actually left 2 of their guns there. The Glock and the Smith & Wesson pistol were left at the store for cleaning. And I think they ran a check on the guns at the gun store there. They called law enforcement, and the guns were determined, on top of the fact that they were felons, the guns were stolen. So 2 strikes there. And then in December, federal law enforcement and local law enforcement agencies executed 3 search warrants on residents connected to Lott and Rucker. And authorities, when they executed their search warrants, recovered a 9mm pistol, a second firearm, and various rounds of ammunitions, and that was from the home connected to Lott. Then a second home connected to Lott, they found magazines, more ammunitions, another Smith & Wesson pistol, and then from when they at Rucker's residence, they found some narcotics. So not connected to the firearms, but landed himself in yet even more trouble.
These are just a couple of fun-loving dudes, huh?
Yeah, just living the dream, I guess, there. And they're going to be living the dream in prison for a long time. Rucker was sentenced to 57 months in prison, to be followed by 3 years supervised release, and Lott 185 months in prison, to be followed by 3 years supervised release. So these guys are in some serious trouble. And obviously you can say that they stole the guns. That's a terrible thing. You shouldn't steal anything. But let's just go back to, let's talk about the root of the problem here. These are felons. These are guys released from jail. Mark, do you think that it should be illegal for a felon, and they didn't say in the article, unfortunately, if these are violent or non-violent felons, so we'll just say felons altogether, for a felon to go to a shooting range, to own a firearm?
Well, those are almost, 2 different layers. You could almost separate them if you wanted. Maybe you could say they shouldn't own a firearm, but we could still allow them at the range. I, of course, would say they should be allowed to do all of these things because to me, and we've discussed this before, but if someone is to have rights, then they need to have their rights. And if someone is going to be determined to be free in society, to be allowed to leave the confines of the jail cell for whatever reason they were sentenced to be there, once they are a free citizen of some kind, I feel that they really do need to have all of their rights, including the rights to own a firearm, the rights to, go to the shooting range as well. It's not clear that to me from the article exactly, was it the fact that they were stolen that flagged this thing, and did they only find out that they were felons afterwards? Because it's really not clear, because it looks like that it was just running the check on the guns that pointed out the fact that they were stolen. So obviously, the fact that they stole guns, that's obviously a crime, and they should obviously go to jail for that. I don't know how I feel about I do know how I feel. I don't think that there should be extra punishment one way or the other for simply having already been a felon if they indeed did serve their time for whatever they were sentenced for prior to that.
Yeah, I'm assuming what happened is probably to use the gun range, probably to give some identification, so they gave their names and driver's license numbers and whatnot. And then when they left the firearms, it's probably standard procedure when they're cleaning a gun to maybe to run a check to see if it's stolen. That'd be probably a smart thing to do. So they probably found that connected to the names. Pretty stupid, really, for these felons to do that. Bringing illegal guns and leaving them to be cleaned. You can't feel bad for these guys, number one, because they stole these firearms, but number two, because even though, you and I might believe that it's not right for felons to be prohibited from owning firearms, that is the law, and they should know the law. And if they don't want to go back to jail, they really should obey the law, especially they should obey it, not just overtly be breaking it. This is actually a pretty good interlude to our next segment here, because we're talking about gun rights being prohibited from felons. And in the state of Virginia, the governor there just gave felons another right back, or at least felons retroactively. It's not going forward yet, but the governor in Virginia, Governor Terry McAuliffe, Mark can say it better than I can.
Terry McAuliffe.
There we go. There, it's perfect.
Oh, the wee little governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe.
Little did you know, Mark is actually Irish, so that's yeah.
It's true, and I only recently found that out through the fine folks at 23andMe. So for just under $200 and a little bit of saliva, you too can know the full contents of your DNA.
So it's proof that your drinking problem can always be attributed back to your Irish heritage.
I can now have something to blame it on.
So a little more details, a little more background on this, on the governor of Virginia signing this here. The governor's order applies to all violent and nonviolent felons who had finished their sentence and supervised release as of the Friday that he signed it. And this restored their voting rights. Previous Virginia governors had restored rights on an individual basis, but nothing done to an entire category with a single pen stroke to this point. Now, the order stops short, like I said, of creating an automatic restoration of rights. If the governor of Virginia wants this to go forward in the future, they would have to submit new legislation, or he's going to have to sign a similar order, or sign a, I should say, not new legislation. He would have to sign a similar order every single month. Now, the reaction to this, of course, it's being skewed as a political ploy, which I would argue probably is. I don't think Governor Terry McAuliffe there really cares too much about felons. If he did, he would have done this on his first day in office, or would have worked for it on his first day in office. And he's been in office for more than a day. So, it's a little bit politically motivated. Obviously, people have tied it to the fact that, Virginia is a big state to get in the general election, and this would really help Hillary Clinton, assuming that a lot of these convicted felons would vote for Hillary Clinton, which is another topic we'll get to in a minute. Before we talk about that, Mark, what are your thoughts on this, and what are your thoughts on voting rights being restored to felons in general?
Well, overall, I would say it's the same theory as with gun rights. If you're free in society, and I don't see any reason why the fact that you were in jail or were a felon should remove the right to cast your vote. Now, we have different thoughts on voting. I mean, I don't necessarily think voting is, the number one way to change things in society. And it can't be directly compared to gun rights, because gun rights are a little different in the sense that, that's a matter of self-defense. It's a matter of personal protection. It's a clear-cut matter of individual rights. And to deprive someone of their right to own a firearm, I think it's a clear violation of their rights. Whereas voting, it's sort of a different thing. I mean, no one has a natural right to vote. You do have a natural right to defend yourself. You don't have a natural right to vote. And any kind of man-made governmental systems, we might have different ideas about how people could form their own systems of governance. And of course, anybody that joined a certain system of government would be able to vote or have a say in whatever way is laid out. However, in our current society, we don't really, our government is not based on the private property of individuals in this country. Our government is just kind of set up, and we live under it, and we are basically forced to participate or not participate, but knowing that whether we participate or not, at least the vote is something that we should all equally have if we're going to be under this system of direct democracy. If we're going to be in a coercive democracy, essentially is what I would call it, we should allow equal voting rights for all citizens. I think that's pretty clear to me, or at least for all adults, or however we want to determine what that is. But just to simply remove them from felons doesn't make sense. Now, it's interesting that I guess previous governors had restored voting rights, but only on an individual basis. Because to me, that's kind of hypocritical. I mean, either felons shouldn't have voting rights or felons should. Now, maybe there's some governors were differentiating between violent felons or what have you. But I mean, at the end of the day, like I said with the gun thing, if the courts or society or whatever has determined that you are allowed to be free and don't have to be in jail and you have served your time, I mean, the punishment needs to end there. We can't have these extra punishments that just hang around your neck like an albatross for the rest of your life.
That's a really good point. When you were comparing felons having their voting rights or their gun rights prohibited, I'm sure that most felons in Virginia and nationally would probably vote to have their Second Amendment rights rather than their voting rights. I just think that affects you a little more personally. I could be wrong, but if I were a felon or if I was going to have one right, I would definitely pick the right to defend myself over the right to participate in democracy. They both are valuable, but I would think the gun rights are more valuable. Now, what I want to talk about, one kind of interesting aspect here, and you can weigh in on this too, Mark, if you agree with where I'm going with this. It's sort of interesting when you think about probably a good amount of these felons in Virginia, the nonviolent variety, the drug war offenders, some of them probably landed in jail as a result of former President Bill Clinton's anti-crime legislation. He touted this for a long time. Years after his presidency is some great achievement. And then in the past couple of years, he started to disavow the law, saying he went too far. Of course, doing that to prep for Hillary's run, because Hillary's obviously right now, as she's running, she's appealing to the population, the African-American population, the lower income population, a lot of people that have been affected by these drug laws, that have been negatively affected by Bill Clinton's anti-crime legislation. And now it's kind of ironic that this Democratic governor in Virginia changing this, making it so felons can vote. A lot of people that were put in jail, some of them, I'm sure, were put in jail because of Bill Clinton's anti-crime legislation, are now going to be released to vote for Hillary Clinton. So isn't that a little bit ironic, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, why is there this assumption that ex-felons are going to vote for Hillary? Now, I mean, they might. I assume that Terry McAuliffe thinks they might, because I do believe that even if I agree with the move in principle, it's obviously probably politically motivated, because like you said, he's been governor for a few years. He probably would have been fighting for this issue since day one. And the fact that, we're about to see Hillary in this battleground state in this intense fight, I'm sure that plays a pretty strong factor in things.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think everyone would agree that a lot of these felons are going to vote for Hillary, but I don't think if they are, they're not thinking about the issue, because for the longest time, as I said, Hillary and Bill were, they were in favor of and touting and pushing the legislation that put a lot of these people in jail. So just looking at it from a personal perspective, they should think, my gosh, this lady, ruined my life. Why would I vote for her? So you would think there would be some that wouldn't, and I'm sure not all of them will. That would just be crazy if they released all these let all these felons vote and they all vote for Hillary. That might raise some eyebrows. But yeah, I mean, who else are they going to vote for? They're going to vote for Donald Trump.
Maybe
Donald Trump has appealed to, I think, laxing drug laws a little bit. It's hard to really know which day you're talking to Donald, where he stands on the issue now. But I don't think these felons are going to vote Libertarian. Maybe they're listening to the show. If they're listening to Felony Friday, maybe they will vote Libertarian.
Donald Trump wants to make felons great again.
He does.
And he loves them very, very much. I love felons. I've been to prisons. I've got an uncle who's a felon. I just love felons. They're great people. Great, fantastic people.
Speaking of Trump, I posted this today in our today or yesterday. This is earlier in the week, Monday. We're recording this. In our Lions of Liberty forum, our private Facebook group on Facebook. And you can join the private Facebook group by searching Lions of Liberty forum on Facebook. Our group will pop right up and you can join it and we'll approve you. I posted it there. There's a new group called Lions of Trump. I think we should have a debate between the Lions of Liberty and the Lions of Trump. I think we should try to arrange that, maybe a podcast.
Are they part of like the Libertarians for Trump group, and then they're just trying to like kind of saddle onto our Lions theme?
I have no idea. I haven't done any research. Maybe I'll look into that. Probably not. But if anyone out there knows anything about the Lions of Trump, then please forward that information.
Why do I feel like the Lions of Trump are a biker gang that we don't want to mess with?
They actually might be a biker gang, because the article was mostly about a biker gang that was running private security at Trump rallies.
All right, well, there you go.
We don't want to mess with the biker gang. That's
probably best we don't.
Sure. That's where I draw the line at biker gangs. Okay, so now it is time to play America's fastest growing podcast game show. Is this a crime? And should anyone do time? Now, Mark, this is your third time playing the show, so by now you know how this goes. Are you ready?
Oh, I'm so ready. This is my favorite game show to play on a podcast.
You've played game shows before? Other places?
No, I haven't, I guess.
The Price is Right? No.
I played like the home game version of Family Feud before.
That counts for something. I don't know. Not sure what it counts for, but it counts for something, I guess. The first story here, actually, this might be one of my favorite ones on Is This a Crime and Should Anyone Do Time, for many reasons, because of its ridiculousness, but also because I think there is some libertarian principles we can glean from this. So this occurred in Springdale, Arkansas. All the craziest things always happen in Arkansas, it seems. This happened at a McDonald's. A McDonald's manager called police to report a robbery, questionable use of the word robbery, after three men allegedly ordered large waters through the drive-thru, dumped them out, went inside and filled them up with soda. So first of all, that's probably a normal thing for teenagers to try to do. So what happens is the manager sees this happening. This is a McDonald's manager who I will say is taking his job very seriously, which I guess I respect that. Sees the kids do this, confronts them. Two of the men, I should say, I think they're all over 18. Two of the men returned their drinks, but the third, a Mr. Cody Morris, reportedly fled. And not only did he just flee, he didn't flee on foot. He got in his car, and this manager was taking his job very seriously. The manager jumped in front of the car, trying to stop it, and this guy, this 18-year-old kid, hit him with his car, all for stealing some soda.
Anyway, he really does take his job seriously, that he would literally risk his life to prevent the theft of this soda. And really, if you think about it, I mean, once the soda is in the cup, it's gone. you're not going to serve that soda to another customer. So it really seems like a silly thing to stand up and fight for. I mean, I guess in a strange way, I do actually respect it.
Yeah. So come on, McDonald's, promote this manager. He is diehard McDonald's. You got to get this guy. You got to get this guy in an executive role immediately. So they found this kid at a bowling alley a little bit later, and he was charged with felony robbery. I'm assuming the robbery part, I think with the robbery, it has to be some sort of violent act, and that had to be him hitting the manager with the car, because just stealing the soda, that's not robbery. That's just theft, petty theft. And he was released on $2,500 bond. So why on earth would a manager risk his life? That's one question for
that soda, I don't know.
Jumping in front of a car. And why would a teenager not just stop when confronted and just hand the soda over and say, "It got me this time," and then just go home? And then lastly, the most important question, is this a crime or should anyone do time?
All right, so the first one we're just going to brush over. I don't know why the manager was so serious about the soda issue, but, he's dedicated to his job, so fair enough. Yeah, it also seems like a silly thing to play your flag on if you're Cody Morris. I mean, his two friends gave the sodas back and everything went. And again, why do they care if they give the sodas back? At the worst, they should just say, don't do that. Get out of here. And I mean, getting the soda back serves no purpose. It's already in another customer's cup. But anyway.
Well, it's kind of like, I guess, a punitive damage. Like if cops catch a kid underage drinking, they'll pour out all the beer in a toilet or something in front of them. So
makes sense. But and then is this a crime, though? And should anyone do time? Now, that is difficult. No, it's not difficult if he really ran him over with his car. So for that part, 100% a crime. And technically, if we're going to be technical here and really get down to brass tacks, if you order a water and you then go in and take a soda that you didn't pay for, that is theft. It is a crime. But I wouldn't say that crime on its own deserves time. Because I think, if you got an 18-year-old kid, you shouldn't ruin a kid's life because he's, poured some soda instead of water, Find the kid, make him pay, 4 times the cost of the soda. So like $2. I don't know. I really don't think somebody should be in prison for such a thing. But clearly, when you add the element of hitting the manager with your car, that's a crime. That definitely is a crime. So I don't really have too much sympathy for this kid. If he got arrested just for the soda thing, which is kind of what I thought when I first saw the headline, that's what they made it seem like. If that was the only thing he did and he got arrested, I would hope there'd be a more reasonable way to resolve that issue than by sending a kid to jail or trying to prosecute him or any of that stuff. But the fact that he hit him with his car, I think that changes the game. So I'm going to say it is a crime because he hit him with his car. it's pretty clear cut.
Should he do time?
Oh, see, I was trying to wiggle out of that one. You know what? For hitting somebody with I don't necessarily, that brings us to our whole crime and punishment system. I don't necessarily think, the justice system should be about punishment per se, although that certainly can be an aspect of it. If someone is a rapist, they should probably be punished for that. But really what it should be doing in the case of crimes with victims, you generally want to compensate the victim. So I'd be more prone to just say, is there a way that this Cody Morris can compensate the victim of his crime, which in this case was the manager who hit with his car? But to not avoid the question completely, I suppose in a criminal justice system where jail time is standard for assaulting people, then he probably should do a little time, even if it wouldn't be necessarily the ideal way I would, lay out a justice system. But, it's clearly a crime. It is. As stupid as the thing it started with is, it turned into a crime when he ran him over with the car.
Yeah, well, I don't know if he ran him over with the car.
Or hit him with the car or whatever. I don't know. I have to see it.
Still.
Is the manager exaggerating? Did he just did he stand next to the car and kind of get brushed off while he was driving off? Or was he truly hit with the car? and injured? I don't know the details. It doesn't seem like those details are really available. So,
yeah.
But
they're not.
From the information we have, if he hit him twice with his, well, in fact, he was hit twice too. One time I might be able to say could have been an accident, but twice, probably not. So I'm sticking with the crime and the time for this one. I think that might be my first time.
There you have it. This kid is getting no love. And that is a bit of a provocative headline, of course. Obviously there's much more to the story than just stealing the soda. So, yeah, it's a crime and he should do time. And I agree with you, Mark. I think this kid needs to learn a lesson. I don't know if he should, have a felony on his record for this, but, maybe he should. That is a violent act. If he did indeed really hit this person with his car, this manager is not trumping up these allegations. So I definitely agree with you. I wanted to talk about, for the next item here, and is this a crime? Should anyone do time? A story that's been covered in the mainstream recently. And just this week, it broke. This is of course, the Tamir Rice shooting in Cleveland. And just this week, it broke that the city of Cleveland is paying $6 million to settle the Rice family's lawsuit that they brought over this shooting. Now, if you're not familiar, if you don't remember the story, I'll post links to it. I'm not going to go in depth on it here. We've talked about it on past podcasts. We've written about it. I will link to it in the show notes, but I'll just talk about quickly what happened. This is the case, of course, where this with Tamir Rice was playing in the park with a toy gun, and Officer Timothy Lohman, who was a trainee at the time, an officer trainee, shot Tamir just moments after arriving on the scene in the park. Someone in the park actually called and said, there's this man in the park with a gun. It could be a toy gun. I don't know if that wasn't passed on to the officer or not. But anyway, the officer shows up. And if you've seen the video, it's traumatic and disgusting. This officer jumps out of the car and immediately shoots this kid. And of course, the officers say that he reached for his waistband, which could be, which they're saying he was reaching for his gun. So just a very sad case altogether. And of course, the awarding of the $6 million, that's not coming from these officers. These officers face no criminal charges. A grand jury in 2014 did not indict them. And actually, the DA who did not indict them was voted out. So maybe that's a positive thing for voting in your district attorneys, I guess. A positive thing that came from that guy's out of a job, or at least out of the public sphere. I guess the question here is, Mark, do you think the act of this officer pulling up, jumping out of his car, and shooting Tamir Rice without even, you could argue that he could have hid behind his car, could have hid behind the car door, pulled his gun and yelled at him if he really did think that he was carrying a gun. Do you think that this was a crime, that this officer killed Tamir Rice?
Well, if you only said it on paper, if you just read what happened, you might think that it's kind of a tough call because, yeah, they got a report of this guy with a gun. First of all, is it illegal to carry a gun in Ohio? It might be. It is in my state, but I don't know if it's the same in Ohio. So is that even cause to call police?
I believe it is at least to open carry. It's against a lot of open carry most places, and this would be, I guess, a case of open carry.
Okay, well, fair enough. I mean, the officer probably, when they get that call, is probably a little on edge. They heard about someone with a gun, so now they are suddenly thinking that they're in a potentially life-threatening situation. So you can understand why they might be a little, on edge when they get there. So if you read the story and you think, oh my God, it looked like a guy with a gun and then the officer shot him in self-defense, you might think that it's potentially reasonable. But when you see the video, the video is just, the officer just rolls up and shoots the kid. It happened so fast that you got to think there was just no even thought about doing any due diligence on this matter at all to see what was going on, see who it is. I don't believe he was pointing a gun at anybody in particular. There wasn't someone's life in immediate danger. So, it seems like an overreaction at best. And, I don't know if I can necessarily go as far as to say it's 100% a crime. Because, again, I don't know all the specifics of the circumstances of what was actually happening on the ground. I only know what I saw from the video. I don't know what the officer was told. But I think should be... there should be a trial. I think there should be a criminal trial probably. And, a grand jury declined to have one. So we can say, oh, well, it's just not going to happen. But, we've talked before about the grand jury system and how rigged that can be in favor of the police officers. And it's almost impossible to get a grand jury to indict a police officer because the system is basically set up to protect the police officers. So we can't really use that as a measure of right or wrong here. But I certainly lean towards crime. It's a very serious thing because if it's a crime, then you pretty much have to advocate for this officer to be in jail for life or perhaps get the death penalty, depending on, the state and what your beliefs are. So to me, it's at best negligence. If it's not intentional homicide, it's at best, negligent manslaughter or something like that, because clearly this was just a very quick reaction, a quick, deadly reaction to a situation that didn't need to be one.
An awful situation. Really, any way you look at it. And like I said, it's $6 million payment from the city of Cleveland. It's going to be $3 million payments, something like that. An odd thing I saw about this, according to the terms of the settlement of this agreement, the city is acknowledging no fault in Tamir's death. They're acknowledging no fault in the settlement, but they're paying the family $6 million. Am I wrong, Mark, or is not just making the payment? And of course, this is not coming from, out of the administrators or the police officers or these two police officers who were there and the one who shot Tamir. It's not coming out of their pocket. It's coming out of the taxpayers of Cleveland. So is there any way does that make sense? Is it possible that the city can acknowledge no fault and then pay $6 million? Am I missing something?
Well, it's possible, but it doesn't make sense. But it is what happens. I mean, that's a big problem with our system of justice here is that, I mean, there is a blue bias. I mean, if you're a member of law enforcement, you're simply not going to receive the same level of justice as a citizen would. And, the fact is, if I rolled up and shot Tamir Rice, I would at least be arrested. I would at least have a little bit more research done into the case, and I'd probably be put on trial. And if I lost that trial, I would probably go to jail, or perhaps I, out of my own pocket, would have to pay Tamir Rice's family $6 million. But in cases like this, it's just, I mean, there's no right answer because the family does deserve justice. They probably do deserve to be compensated, but who are they being compensated by? Not by the officers, not by the people that did this, but by themselves, because they're taxpayers, by the city of Cleveland. And that's just, it kind of reminds me of the Eric Dorner was his name. I think that was his name out here.
Eric Dorner, yeah, the guy who was running from the cops.
Right. I mean, out here when the police were hunting for this guy, they in the midst of all this, they shot up a truck with two Asian ladies because they thought the truck was the same truck that Dorner was driving. And the ladies didn't die, but they were injured, and they received millions of dollars for the injuries paid by the city of Los Angeles, but the officers didn't get in trouble. So it's like, it's the same thing. They're admitting a wrong and, putting all this money out there. And then at the same time, they're saying, but we didn't do anything wrong because no one's going to face any charges. And in the case of Cleveland, they're actually saying, oh, we did nothing wrong, but hey, here's $6 million. That makes no sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense. And, really, I did want to talk about this today for a couple of reasons. But, the reason I do this show is to highlight injustice in the criminal justice system. That's the major overarching reason why I do it. And, of course, the biggest injustice here is that Tamir Rice is dead. And he's dead, and the person that shot him is not going to be held responsible for it, is not going to be held accountable for it. That's the biggest injustice. But there's also another injustice where the people of Cleveland, the taxpaying citizens there, are going to be forced to pay for it. They're being punished for it.
Sure. And I'm sure there's going to be like some school that's underfunded in Cleveland and is going to be like 20,000 short of needing new books. And then we're going to be like, oh, yeah, but no problem to get $6 million to pay out to Tamir Rice's family. But I mean, think about, obviously, I'm not for that system of financing schools and that sort of thing. But if you're a taxpayer and you're having the money forcibly extracted, I guess I would feel better if it was going to my schools than if it was going to pay for officers to murder 12-year-old boys.
Yes, I would definitely agree. I'd rather have public money going to schools than to murder. So I'm going to run for president. That'll be my slogan. Schools, not murder.
It's just schools with that greater than symbol, murder. There you go.
Schools are greater than murder. That's going to be 2020.
First libertarian to run on a public school funding platform.
Yeah. Hey, stranger things have happened.
Hey, public school. Hey, at least it's not murder, except when it is.
There you go. So that's all we have today, Marc. Thank you for coming back on the show for the third time, your third appearance on Felony Friday.
I'm racking them up. I think I'm the current leader, right?
You are the leader. Brian McWilliams is on your heels, but you are the leader. You are the current leader. So is there anything do you want to talk about your episode on Monday coming up? Who do you have on the show?
Monday, let's see. Monday, I'll be welcoming back, I don't know if you remember James Newcomb. He was the guy who joined me on the show about a year ago to discuss his situation at the time as a conscientious objector. He was stationed in the U.S. Army, stationed in North Korea, and he was attempting to get out of his service. Well, I'm bringing him back on the show to give us a little update a year later. And spoiler alert, he is no longer in the Army. So this all worked out, but we're going to kind of try to get some of the details on that and have a little discussion about how it all went down. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely listen to the whole podcast. I know Marc just did spoil the podcast, but you want to hear the details in between what happened.
Well, we spoil it in the first minute anyway, so it wasn't a major spoiler alert.
Yeah, so check that out on Monday. And of course, if you're thinking, well, how can I remember to check that out? Well, it's easy. All you do is you can go to our show notes page, and we have a link right there to click to subscribe on iTunes or on Stitcher. Or you can just, as we were talking before, go to Google and search Lions of Liberty iTunes or Stitcher, and you'll find our pages where you can sign up for iTunes or Stitcher to receive our shows and subscribe. So you could do this and have the show just zipped right into your iPhone there or your Android device on Monday, ready for you to listen. So go ahead and do that right now if you haven't. And you can also go on there and you can rate the show, give us 5 stars if you like what we're doing. And if you really like what we're doing, please share the show. Email it out to your friends, text it, share it on Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus, if people still use Google Plus. Share it on all that stuff. And you can check out all the past Felony Friday shows. Go to lionsofliberty.com/Felony Friday. A lot of good content there. Check it all out, and you can find all of the podcasts we've had on Lions of Liberty at lionsofliberty.com/podcast. You can find the Ron Paul episode and all of the other past episodes. So be sure to check that out. Thank you all for listening, guys. It's been another great show. I've had a great time talking with my guest, Marc Clair. This is John Odermatt signing off. Always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.